Hello, and thank you for attending the Distance Learning Consortium Hot Topics. My name is Ginny Joseph, and I work at the Orange County Department of Education. I will be speaking about Tier 2 targeted support in the virtual classroom. In this module, I will provide an overview of the recommended virtual adaptations of the Tier 2 intervention Check-in, Check-out, or CICO. I will also demonstrate the ways in which check-in, check-out connects to social-emotional skills development and share the emerging research regarding benefits of the check-in, check-out intervention for students with internalizing behaviors. As a welcome activity, I invite you to reflect on the ways that you know when students need more social-emotional behavioral support than what is already provided to all students. You may have regular check-ins with all students at the beginning of class. You might look at participation data, or you might check in with the families in some way. What are the signs that indicate a student needs more support in your school and classroom? What might you see or hear to indicate a student needs additional support? Check-in, check-out is a well-researched, evidence-based Tier 2 targeted intervention. When implemented with fidelity, it has strong positive outcomes for students. There are many components of setting up a successful check-in, check-out intervention, including systems to support the staff to put the intervention in place, practices to support the student's success during the intervention, and data to support decision-making related to implementation fidelity and student progress. For more information on all components of check-in, check-out, please refer to Responding to Problem Behaviors in Schools, 3rd edition, the check-in, check-out intervention. There are also some resources about Tier 2 evidence-based interventions provided in the resources for this module. 3 main reasons why check-in, check-out is successful is because it provides increased positive interactions with adults throughout the day, provides more structure to the school day, and incorporates opportunity for instruction in social skills and practice in self-monitoring of behavior. These 3 components are essential to any Tier 2 intervention. It is important to be aware of these 3 essential elements specific to check-in, check-out so that they remain in place even if there need to be adaptations to the intervention due to virtual implementation. Adopting a trauma-informed approach in a school setting does not yet have the empirical evidence on the specific components that should be involved. However, we do know that when students are exposed to any type of trauma, they thrive in environments that are safe, positive, consistent, and predictable. Access to a trusted adult in which to build relationship and assess ongoing needs is also a key component to supporting students with a trauma-informed approach. Additional skill, teaching, and practice should also be built into trauma-informed approaches. With check-in, check-out, there are multiple opportunities for building relationship with a trusted adult during morning check-in and check-out, as well as when receiving feedback from the teacher throughout the day. Feedback is provided in the form of behavior-specific praise, a well-researched and evidence-based practice for fostering relationship. Check-in, check-out is highly structured and provides regular scheduled times throughout the day to receive feedback, lending to the consistency and predictability component of a trauma-informed approach. The add-on for creating a more robust trauma-informed check-in, check-out intervention is to add in systematic regulation strategies. This might happen a couple of different ways. One way is to have students select a regulation activity from a list that they have been taught and can do on their own each day. Another way is to have the check-in facilitator lead the student or a group of students through a body scan or other regulation activity before they go to class. There are clearly ways in which check-in, check-out aligns with a trauma-informed approach as it was originally designed, and with some minor adjustments, it can allow for the addition of regulation strategies to meet the needs of students who have been exposed to or are experiencing trauma. The recommendations and some of the content discussed in this presentation is further outlined in a document linked in the resources from the Center on PBIS. Determining whether or not to implement check-in, check-out in a virtual setting includes various considerations, such as the feasibility for the family and school to support the intervention, the types of distance learning adaptations to the systems that support check-in, check-out, and fine-tuning the daily progress report to support specific social emotional behavior supports when necessary. I will go through each of these three pieces to demonstrate the options for adapting check-in, check-out for a virtual setting. If your school has not yet set up a system to implement the check-in, check-out intervention, I invite you to consider the feasibility and adaptations as they pertain to your school's needs, and also what your students may need the intervention to look like given the distance learning environment. The biggest consideration for whether or not to implement is the feasibility of the intervention for the family and school during the context in which we are living, working, teaching, and learning. If students are learning from home for part or all of their school day, families may need support to understand how to set up expectations at home during the student's school day. Additionally, families may need coaching and practice opportunities on what feedback looks like for their student throughout the day. Most importantly, families may need to take a break from the check-in, check-out intervention if the added task is contributing to the stress in the home. It may be the case that a student was on check-in, check-out, but due to work and home obligations, the family is not able to provide the feedback and support required by the check-in, check-out intervention. For schools, a reevaluation of students in need of the intervention is important. Schools may wish to send out a quick survey to students who were previously enrolled in the intervention to be sure there is a need to continue. Additionally, schools should take a look at their data to determine if there are new or more students in need of a Tier 2 intervention, such as check-in, check-out. Last, schools need to set up a reorientation due to any adaptations necessary for distance learning conditions. This might include creating individualized daily progress reports customized to student needs while at home, and the ways in which teachers will provide feedback. There are three different ways in which student feedback could look different during distance learning. We could provide feedback for a focus period of each day. We could provide feedback based on the activities that occur during distance learning, or we could provide feedback for activities throughout the day at school and home. Over the next few slides, I will share with you some examples of daily progress reports that come from the Center on PBIS guiding document. They are samples based on the three different variations I just mentioned that schools may need to put in place to accommodate for our current context. A daily progress report does two things. It serves as the tool to provide the opportunity to give feedback to students and for students to receive that feedback, and it also collects some data for us to determine progress on skills. This example here shows the previously taught school-wide expectations: be safe, be respectful, be responsible, and it looks like this student is receiving feedback on just one focused time during each day. This next daily progress report is a sample of a student who is receiving feedback for expected behaviors during various distance learning activities, listed here as morning circle, live instruction, independent reading, math app, and homework. This last example provides opportunity for feedback from the beginning of the day all the way through bedtime. The idea is that we determine what students need as well as what is feasible and adjust the number and scope of the opportunities for feedback. For students who we want to be sure we are reinforcing new essential skill sets, those can be easily added to the daily progress report. This addition should only be included if it is determined the student needs specific feedback for those new skills to encourage them to happen throughout the day. Only add what is necessary to avoid confusion and too many goals for the student. I'm going to talk now on the ways in which we need to adapt how and when to give feedback. One obstacle, given the different schedules that schools are working with, is that teacher availability during virtual learning may vary depending on the day and be more limited. One consideration is how technology might be utilized to recreate check-in and check-out procedures. For example, have students log into a web meeting and create breakout rooms for each student. Visit the breakout rooms and use those as a space for morning check-in and afternoon check-out. You may also consider text messaging, brief recorded videos, and chat features as a means for providing feedback throughout the day. Families may also benefit from checking in with the student and family on the line together, or just the family household apart from the student. These types of family-style check-ins may occur as often as needed. One final consideration for an adaptation for check-in, check-out is to recruit other school staff to provide the check-ins. Counselors, custodians, cafeteria workers, paraprofessionals, and other school staff often have connections and relationships with students, but may no longer be seeing students directly due to distance learning. Consider how you might incorporate these staff into part of the intervention that would be of benefit to students. Remember, one of the most important elements of check-in, check-out is to provide meaningful feedback multiple times throughout the day. As long as students have access to the frequent feedback, the mode of delivery is not as important. I'm going to talk for a minute about the difference between externalizing and internalizing behaviors and why it is important to consider all types of behavior. Externalizing behaviors are those that are more easily observed by others and are directed outward. Examples of externalizing behaviors may include aggression, disruption, fighting, noncompliance, and are typically the behaviors that get the attention of adults due to their disruptive nature. Students who engage in externalizing behavior are more likely to be referred for an intervention like check-in, check-out than students with internalizing behaviors. Internalizing behaviors, on the other hand, are not always obvious and include behaviors that are focused inward. Some examples include being sad or experiencing depressive symptoms, sleeping more than usual, social withdrawal or shy behaviors, feelings of loneliness, guilt, or nervousness. Internalizing behaviors such as these do not typically disrupt the school day and can easily go unnoticed by adults. One way to make sure you account for both externalizing and internalizing behaviors for students potentially in need of additional intervention is to be sure to include data that would capture internalizing behaviors. Prior to the pandemic, we had a mental health crisis, which has only become more of a concern during this time of increased isolation and uncertainty. There are many tools for screening for externalizing and internalizing concerns. And we direct you to this best practices guide linked in the resources for more information. I also advise using caution right now when using screeners and examining the data. Screeners were not normed for a pandemic, and the results may likely over-identify problems that should be addressed instead by modifying Universal Tier 1 practices for all students, given our current context. Additionally, this is a good time to mention that when we have information that a student needs more intervention, we have a child find obligation to provide that support. It is essential to use the data we have to find the students in need of the appropriate level of intervention. One idea to make sure we are using meaningful data to find the students who need more support is to think about what we need to know about families and students right now. Here are some examples of data sets you may have access to already or could easily develop to begin determining who needs more support for things like attendance, access to essentials, and potential need for mental health supports during a time of crisis, such as when family members become ill during a chronic situation where students are living with frontline essential workers. Additionally, your school team may want to look at developing a family check-in, such as this one from a school in Missoula, Montana, where they included items they wanted to know about to proactively identify students who need additional support. I'm going to bring us back to check-in, check-out for a minute. In the past, educators have identified check-in, check-out as an intervention for students with externalizing behaviors. However, there's a growing body of research showing positive effects of using check-in, check-out as an intervention for students with internalizing behaviors as well. Researchers at the University of Missouri reported some of the things that were said as a result of implementing check-in, check-out with students who have internalizing behaviors. Teachers reported students asking questions for the first time, taking more risks, and applying strategies they had learned. Students are also reporting that it works and helps to increase their self-esteem. This all makes sense, of course, because, for example, if you feel like nobody is noticing you and suddenly there is an increase in positive feedback, you are likely going to start feeling a little better. We have linked a video and documents of the suggested modifications for check-in, check-out for internalizing behaviors in the resources. And there's a new chapter in the Responding to Problem Behaviors book that was mentioned earlier. The process for providing feedback is the key to the modification, so I encourage you to check those out, especially if check in, check out is already an intervention you are using. Let's talk a moment about putting this into action. One tool that is vital to our context right now is regular check-ins with students and families. Here are some questions you could provide to families to identify how things are going and if they need any additional support right now. More information on how to use this tool is provided in the guidance document found in the resource from the Center on PBIS. Given all that you have just heard, think back to the welcoming activity where I asked you to think about how you know when students need more support. I invite you to write down and share with a colleague one thing you might do differently to notice and acknowledge when students need more support. Thank you for attending this hot topic on Tier 2 support in the virtual classroom. Take care of yourself and be well.